very happy Sabbath to each one of you. It's a privilege, I think, to be able to come on Sabbath and worship the Lord. A couple of days ago, I was going up the steps and I missed a step and hit it just with my toe rather than my foot, and my toe really snapped up, and I felt a pain on the back of my leg, and there's a little indentation. I think the muscle got torn a little bit. And I was wondering, how long is this going to be, this pain? But fortunately, by today, I'm pretty good. So that's why I say it's a privilege to come and worship the Lord here, feeling pretty good. But I know that Muru here is not feeling well. So let's make sure we pray for Muru and that he will get the proper medical attention for his back pain. Okay. Today, the topic I have is don't take it personally. It's taken from The Lost Art of Thinking by Neil Nedley. Myself, Dr. Eric Louis, and Thomas Chin divided up this 26 chapters and gave talks at Sungai Ara. So from the hard work we did, we're going to share. I'm going to share chapter 7. Don't take it personally. Okay, what is this all about? Well, if you look at the slide there are two stories about two people. One is Anthony, who was driving a truck, and his truck ran over a little boy by the name of Jacob, who darted in front of him without warning. This reminds me of my friend Chow Tek. When we were growing up, he was a teenager. He had a motorbike riding down Dato Kramat Road, and a boy ran out, and he hit the boy with his motorbike, and the boy died. Similar to this story here of Anthony. And then there was another story here of Mrs. Bender, who was a teacher and scolded someone in a class for not studying and doing poorly on the test. She finished her scolding with saying, I'm not going to mention names, but you know who you are. And there was somebody sitting in the class who thought, oh dear, she must be thinking of me. Her name was Sophia. And she felt like everybody knew who Mrs. Bender was talking about her. And she felt so ashamed that she had been publicly scolded. That's how she felt. And we call that taking personal blame. Anthony took personal blame for this little boy dying because he hit him with his truck and he died. And he was so depressed that he couldn't function well at his work. And he lost his job. And he himself and his family were suffering because of it, because he took this accident personally. He killed little boy Jacob. Sophia was a B student before Mrs. Bender said that somebody didn't do their homework. But she felt so ashamed and hurt and angry that she didn't study very well and became an F student. No, she failed because she thought that Mrs. Bender was talking about her. She took it personally, even though no names were mentioned. Now, this is actually using blame. When someone doesn't mention your name, but you believe that you are the one being pointed out, you are taking blame yourself. You're personalizing the problem for yourself. Sometimes you may have a small part to play, but you take 100% of the blame. and you personalize it. You are the problem. And then you begin to indulge in if only thoughts. If only I had done this, if only I had done that. And that's what Anthony did. If I had not driven my truck so quickly, or if I had taken another route where I was going, I would not have hit this little boy. And the if only is haunting the mind so much that you cannot go forward. You are living in the past. So interpreting comments, questions, and behavior of others as an attack on yourself is called personalization. Now, nobody here does that, right? Unfortunately, many of the distorted thinking that is found in this book of Dr. Neil Natlee's and also in David Burns' book, where he took his information from, unfortunately, there are described 10 ways of wrong thinking, and all of us indulge in it sometime. Not all the time, but all of us indulge in it. See if you can catch yourself, as I describe personalization. See if you can catch yourself in some instance, perhaps in the past, that you did this. Normally, there are some things in life that we cannot control. And doing our best, it still happens. And when you blame yourself for things that you cannot control, then it is unfair personalization, victimizing yourself. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable, and so we say, no, I'm not the victim, I'm not the one to be blamed, and instead you begin to blame other people. So personalization is not just blaming yourself 100%. Sometimes you refuse to take the responsibility and you put that blame on other people. You personalize it on them. So the blame game has shifted from yourself to other people. It's not my fault. It's all 100% their fault. And that is just as bad in this blame game. Again, the problem is not just blaming, but you can lose self-esteem or you can lose respect for other people. The other thing is, for the person who has blamed himself and instead blames other people, they reject constructive criticism. So that I'm not at fault, don't tell me what to do. And good instruction is rejected. And then assumptions are made about what other people think. Maybe it is exaggerated, blown up bigger, and becomes a big problem. This personalization is called an equal opportunity error. Not an equal opportunity employer, but it's an equal opportunity error. Anybody can do it. And it is, unfortunately, it is even possible for a sensible person who is very logical and does things well, even for that person, in some things, to become very subjective. And it is equally true of men as well as women when we do personalization. Many people actually are always on the lookout to see what people are talking about them. It's just like politicians, taking a poll before the election. How many percent of people like me? How many percent of people don't like me? What do they say? So some people are obsessed with what people think of them, that they are like politicians, taking a census, a poll of what people are saying about them. And as a result, the personalization can take place because of what they think people are thinking about them. The questions to ask before taking blame on yourself or blaming other people, is he really picking on me, or is there another explanation? See, for that girl, Sophia, in the class that was a B student, became F student, was really her that the teacher was talking about, or was it somebody else? She didn't stop to think that. She just personalized it herself. And then the second question to ask is so-and-so really my personal blood enemy? Or is she, for whatever reason, simply behaving badly at this particular time in her life? So, make sure that when someone you think is criticizing you, is saying bad things about you, don't jump to the conclusion that they truly are attacking you. There are things happening in people's lives that we don't know about. And sometimes they just at the point in time take you as the punching bag, attacking you because of their frustration. So give people the benefit of the doubt, okay? And give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You're not as bad as what they think you are. So consider other plausible explanations before you assume that it's a personal attack. There is something called the politics of blame. John Kennedy, who served as president of the U.S. just for a few years before he got assassinated, he said, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." That's pretty good advice. America just recently had a midterm elections. Oh, there was so much blame game going on. Insults flying all over the place. And then Hubert Humphrey, who is another politician who died not too many years ago, he said, "To err is human. To blame it on someone else is politics." So we see that is very true. I just looked up one article in a computer, and you can look it up in the newspaper every day. And Theodore Roosevelt said, "We must remember not to judge any public servant by any one act, and especially should we beware of attacking the men who are merely the occasions and not the cause of disaster." So sometimes you just happen to be the president of the country, and someone runs amok and kills, and you get blamed for it. Or you happen to be the president, and there's a big hurricane that comes and wipes out cities, flooding, and many people get killed. And your army or whatever help that you send is a bit slow, and of course you get blamed. You are there for that occasion, and you get blamed. So Theodore Roosevelt was very aware of that. Don't just blame someone. It may not be his fault. It's just that he happens to be there on that occasion. Now, in escalated feelings in personalization, people can get hurt. A child's immature rebelliousness, just by being a child in its behavior, can result in the parents getting so angry they practice child abuse. There was a newspaper report some years ago of a gentleman picking up the baby by the feet and swinging the baby so that his head hit the wall and killed the baby. And when he was asked why he did that, he says, "This baby is so disobedient, he wouldn't stop crying. I fed him, changed the diaper, and so I have to punish him." So the baby was just being a baby, not trying to irritate the father, but he took it personally and became so irritated he killed the baby. So it can turn out to be abuse of other people when you personalize it too much. A grumpy spouse comes home from work and he meets a hypersensitive spouse who has been working very hard at home, and they exchange unpleasant words. And as a result, World War III begins. So, it's not because of the other person, but because of work. But they bring the frustrations of work home. And a person being cut off in the traffic causes road rage in that person and ends in death. It happens in the US, it happens in Malaysia also. We feel personally attacked. So, it can be bad. There are hotheads in history, even in Bible history. If you look at Luke 9:54, there was James and John, the sons of thunder. One time, they were not welcome at a village, and James and John asked Jesus, "Shall we call down fire from heaven to burn them up?" They were personalizing the rejection, and they wanted to take revenge. Haman, a high official during the time of the King Artaxerxes, and Esther became the queen. He was very insulted by Mordecai, the uncle of Esther, because Mordecai didn't want to bow down to him. He didn't find out for sure why, but Mordecai, being a Jew, refused to bow before a man. If you look at some explanations, they say other things too. But I believe that Mordecai, being a Jew, would not bow down to the man. And so he felt so insulted, personally angry at Mordecai. He prepared a tall gallows to hang Mordecai. And that was not enough. He wanted to kill all the Jews that belonged to Mordecai's race. Of course, he did not succeed. But that's how bad personalization can get. Then you read in 1 Samuel 8:15 about the prophet Samuel. He was getting old, and his sons were immoral, and they were priests. And the people didn't like his sons, so they asked for a king. And he felt rejected. But God told him, they are not rejecting you, they are rejecting me. And then sometimes we feel in personalization that we are the object of attack. I know of people who told me over the past years, if you get one disaster and then another one, expect a third one. You are being targeted by God or fate or whatever. Things always happen in threes. How many of you heard of that? Things happen in threes? Nobody here? Oh, okay. A few people. It's not just a belief in America, but I've heard people say it here also. Maybe we are contaminated by American thinking. But things happen in threes. So it becomes a superstition that if you have one thing bad, after another, expect a third one. And those who are Christians say, look at Job. Look at Job. He had lost his wealth, he lost his children, and then he lost his health. That's three. So the Bible says things happen in threes, but that's not necessarily true. Happened to Job. But how many others you see that happens in threes? It's not true. So, personalization of self as the target of disasters or the devil makes you feel like you're a loser. And as a result, you sort of give up fighting. You do not manage the stress. You drown in sorrow, get depressed. But if you are one who recognizes negative events as unfortunate misfortunes in the short term, and you're able to handle the stress better, you will improve in the long term. This is a short-term thing. Everything has a beginning and an end. It's not going to go on so-called forever. You have managed stresses before, and you can manage the stress again by the help of God or fellow brothers and sisters. Now, there's inappropriate guilt that some parents feel when their children do poorly in school. I wonder if I've been a bad parent. Maybe I didn't help my child enough in homework, or something that's not right in my family. That's why my child doesn't do well. But you know, each child, according to studies that Dr. Neil Netley points out, everybody has a frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe tells us what is right, what is wrong, and it tells us to be hardworking or to be lazy. It's a conscience. And so you can be the best parent and your children still have the frontal lobe that says no. It's not your fault necessarily. My father told me that God was not such a good parent because he had only 2 children, Adam and Eve, and they both turned out bad. I didn't know what to say to my father because he was right. But, you know, God wasn't just such a bad parent. He sent Jesus Christ as our Savior. That's what I should have told my father, you know, but it's too late now. My father is dead. But at the time when he told me, I was at a loss for words. And I didn't know at that time to tell him that, well, you know, God was still a good parent, but he gave the power of choice to Adam and Eve. They used the frontal lobe in the wrong way. So, you can be the best parent in the world, but your children may not necessarily be the best children in the world. So don't blame yourself. But I'm not saying that all parents are good. I'm just saying that some parents who think they're the worst because the child didn't do well, it's not necessarily true. So you must identify inappropriate guilt by asking some questions. Was this bad situation caused by my negligence? Did I know what the negative consequences of my actions would be prior to the incident? Do other people consider me at fault for these circumstances? If my best friend were in this situation, would I consider him guilty? Were there any key factors that I had no control over, such as others' actions or unpredictable natural events? Can I do anything to correct any damage? So there are quite a number of questions that you can ask before you personalize or blame yourself. Guilt is not so bad if you are really to blame. If you really did something wrong, then guilt is good. It helps us to become humble, confess our sins. And 1 John 1:9 says, if you confess your sins will be forgiven by God. So, guilt is not always bad. It helps us to do restitution and restoration of relationships. It helps you to ask for forgiveness and prevents you from blaming others. So not always is guilt bad, especially if you are responsible. Now, even if personalization is appropriate, you are guilty. Do not equate yourself, who you are, with the erroneous actions, because your actions can change. Who you are is worthwhile. That's why God made you. You are not what your actions are. Actions can be repented of. A restitution can be made. You are not what your actions are. If you decide to change, you can. So, number one, the dangers of accepting or allying yourself, equating yourself with your actions is you consider yourself worthless and inadequate. You have an inferiority complex. The second one is denying fault and refusing to change. So that's the opposite end of it. When we recognize that the problem is caused by our wrong action rather than the bad person, especially if there's no intention to be bad, then it's easier for yourself or the person to accept the responsibility of the wrong action. I'm not so bad. I did something wrong. So let me atone for it. I'm not a bad person. Okay? The blame for the negative result is placed on the wrong action rather than on the person. So we don't like the action. We hate the sin. But we love the sinner. That's what God does to us all the time. All the time. So we should do that for ourselves and for others. And when you do that, the person is now free to go about correcting, rectifying the wrong action, rather than punishing himself or denying his responsibility. So, now we come to apologizing when we are in the wrong. What is the purpose of apologizing? If you don't blame others, you accept responsibility, what you can do is apologize. Apology is to set both parties, the one you wronged and yourself who did the wrong, to set both parties free from guilt and resentment. But the difficulty is pride. See, the pride says only weak people apologize. If you're correct, don't need to apologize. You're weak. You're inviting people to criticize you if you go and apologize. But perhaps you have to count the cost of not apologizing, the cost benefit of confrontation. So instead of apologizing, you quarrel, confront. What is the cost of quarreling? The anger, the stress persists. You become more disease prone. Your immunity goes down with stress. There's a danger of worsening of the bad situation. It may cost more energy and time. The relationship is broken. This is the cost of confrontation rather than apology. What's the benefit of confrontation? There are benefits. That's why we do it. It feels good to confront. Why? It lets off steam. It feels so good. He insulted me, I insulted him with a bigger insult. So I win. It makes me feel good to confront. Revenge is sweet. I punish the offender. And hopefully he will not attack me again because I really gave it to him. There's a hope that there was no further insult or wrong coming. Then I do not need to apologize. Apologizing is so face-losing. I attack. Attack is the best form of defense. So, are these benefits for confrontation better than losing the cost of confrontation? You have to think for yourself. And if you think there are more benefits than cost, you will attack. But if you think that cost is too much, then you will not attack. Now, if you do apologize, if you think it's worthwhile to apologize for the things you did, don't say sorry. I remember a teacher in Penang Free School. He said, sorry is not enough. I remember him. He was a very strong individual. And it was very difficult in his class. You want to say sorry because he said, you did something bad. You should apologize. We say sorry, and then he says, sorry not enough. The reason you don't want to say sorry is because the person you wrong may feel worse. So what? You're sorry. I'm even more sorry. I'm your victim. You know. So sorry is not enough. You've got to go beyond that to ask for forgiveness. And there are ways to ask for forgiveness. Don't give any excuses or explanations for your wrong actions. You're exhibiting defensiveness and creates argument and bitterness. So, what are the 4 steps to take in asking for forgiveness? The right way to ask for forgiveness: be frank. I want to ask your forgiveness for whatever thing. Describe the offensive action. I learned that when I was growing up. My mother asked me after I did something wrong, what did you do that was wrong? If I did not admit that I did something wrong, she would spank me some more. She wanted me to say what I did was wrong. Because as long as I refuse to say it, she can spank me and I can cry. She knows that I'm still in rebellion. Because I did not admit what I did was wrong. So she did the right thing. So when you ask for forgiveness, you have to admit the wrong that you did. Describe it. Describe the wrong action. And then, number 2, you must also acknowledge your wrong attitude. Were you rebellious? Were you prideful? Were you selfish? Were you condemnatory? Because the spirit with which you committed the wrong is being despised by the other person more than even the action itself. It's your attitude. And if the attitude doesn't change, they cannot forgive you. You can give money back or pay back or whatever, but if they know your attitude towards them has not changed, they have not forgiven you. They cannot forgive you. The attitude is worse than the action. So you must confess that bad attitude. Number 3, and then you must show empathy. If you don't understand them and you're just saying, I'm sorry I did this, I was wrong, and I was very wicked, I was selfish, but it's all talking about yourself, which may be all true. But you must also understand them. So the third thing to do is, I know how much this must have hurt you. You show empathy. Put yourself in their position, receiving the wrong action or the spirit or the attitude. Explain. Yeah, I can see how it affected you. So if you cannot say this sincerely, you're not ready to ask for forgiveness. So you must be sincere. If you're not sincere, it sounds phony. And forgiveness is not given. Number 4, also be sincere and say, it would mean a lot to me if you would forgive me. And then directly ask, will you forgive me? They will say yes or no. Sometimes they are not ready. Don't expect everybody to say yes just because you went through the correct steps. They are hurt so much. They say, no, I won't forgive you. Not at that time. But you have cleared your conscience. You are seeking release for the person who is offended as well as yourself from bitterness and resentment that would make both of you sick. Now, you have to practice saying the apology. It's not natural for me to apologize or for you to apologize. None of us likes to apologize. So, if we don't practice, it doesn't come out well. You must practice it. Say it to yourself. Go to the cemetery where nobody is listening. Speak it loudly. Go to your bathroom, toilet, whatever. Practice it until it comes out naturally, until it sounds like you are yourself are convinced, okay? But don't write it out and don't give it away. In fact, we learned from the Basic Life Institute of Bill Gothard. He says, don't ever put it in writing. Go personally to the person. Because the writing can be taken and made use of against you. So don't write your apology out and give it to the person. Unless legally it's necessary. There's the lawyer mediated with the judge, and the judge says, you must publish this apology in the newspaper. That's different, okay? We're talking about this personal apology. So you may still not get clear-cut forgiveness, but if you have done it in sincerity, you have done your best before God and man, and you have cleared your conscience, you won't get sick. The other person doesn't forgive you, will continue angry, stressed, that person will get sick, but not you. Okay. Granting forgiveness is one of the hardest things, actually. It's not easy. I know this Dr. Tibbetts of Florida Hospital. He was a chaplain there. I didn't know until I read Dr. Neil Netley's book, but he did an experiment on forgiveness. He had one group of people who learned to forgive. And in 8 weeks, they dropped their blood pressure, which was bothering them. There was a control group, which he did not teach about forgiveness. 8 weeks later, they had not forgiven, didn't know how to forgive, and their blood pressure was still high, didn't drop at all. So there are physical consequences for bitterness and anger. The angriest people before the experiment showed the most drop in blood pressure. Anger is a reaction to hurt and releases a hormone called cortisol in the body. And we know cortisol lowers the immune response and raises the blood pressure. So that's how it affects the body. So chronic anger, which sometimes seems to be calm on the surface, actually leads to high blood pressure, emotional despair, broken relationships, and serious health benefits. The immune system is lower. I used to think it was so strange to think that your anger can cause cancer. But after I gave the series of talks and learned myself the effects of emotions and stress on the body, now I'm convinced, all this stress and anger can cause all kinds of diseases because the immune system controls all the diseases in the body. Now, and granting forgiveness is a process. So sometimes you have to allow people to take time. When you ask them for forgiveness, they're going to take time. The process, first one, is for people who want to forgive. They must recognize that no one is all good or all bad. We have some good and some bad. So now we can accept that the person was bad, but it's not always bad. Number two, you identify yourself as an offender also. And the person who offended you is deserving as much as you the grace of God. So can you also share the grace of God with the other person? If you can, then perhaps you are able to stop wishing revenge or God's punishment on the offender. That's the third phase. The fourth phase is you're finally able to forgive. You wish well for the offender who caused you pain. Then you've really forgiven the person. Matthew 6, 12 to 15, part of which was read by Dr. Dickey. It says forgiveness in the Lord's Prayer is God forgives us as we forgive others. So I said, God is, I thought, such a loving God that if I just confess to Him, He'll forgive me. But here it says, if I forgive others, as I forgive others. So if I hold something against another person, God will also hold back. Oh, He's like me, Is God like me? That He can hold back forgiveness and get stressed? That's what I read into it when some time ago when I was learning the Lord's Prayer. He will not forgive me if I don't forgive others. He's not God, man. He's just like me. But John Piper in 1994 wrote an article on forgiveness. John Piper has wrote 50 books or more. Very good books. It's not an Adventist. I think it's Baptist. But it's written some very good things. So he wrote, the reason why God forgives us as we forgive others is not because we can earn heaven or merit heaven by forgiving others, but because holding fast to an unforgiving spirit proves that we do not trust Christ. We do not love Christ. If we trust Him, we will not spurn His way of life. If we trust Him, we will not be able to take forgiveness from His hand for our $1 million debt and withhold it from our $10 debtor. Because after this statement by Jesus, He told a parable of the person who owed millions and millions and couldn't pay back. And his boss said, "You're forgiven." And then he went out, and his fellow worker owed him very little. He choked him and threw him in prison. And the boss says, "Okay, I'm not going to forgive him. I'm taking back my forgiveness. I'm sending him to prison also." So, the person who doesn't forgive others cannot receive God's forgiveness because the attitude is, I am not going to follow you, God. I'm going to be wicked. And how can God forgive a person who remains in sin? He'll be condoning his sin. So God cannot condone our sin. That's what it means. If we don't forgive others, as God cannot forgive us as we do not forgive others. So God cannot condone sin. That's what He would be doing if we do not forgive others. So what's the strategies for success? Number one, identify inappropriate personalization thoughts. Give benefit of the doubt to offenders. Find out reasons why they're offending us. Do a cost-benefit analysis of confrontation. Number four, grant forgiveness for your own and the other's health. Do not live in the past with if-only thoughts. Live in the present. Accept responsibility for errors, apologize, correct them where possible, and move on with life. So there was a quote by Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Sir," he was saying to some other person, "my greatest concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side. For God is always right." So don't try to argue and fight for your side. Make sure you're on God's side in this matter of personalization. Thank you for your attention.